Hello and welcome to the Marketing Mix. I'm really excited today to be joined by Ellie McBride. I've been waiting for this interview for a while. We had to reschedule, but I promise you it's worth the wait. Ellie has a really interesting story to tell about her business and how she started it and what she's doing to grow it. And we're all going to learn some marketing lessons. I've did a Minal Meets with Ellie, and there were so many little nuggets in there that you can take away and apply to your own business. But we're gonna be talking a bit more about that today. Before I ask Ellie to introduce herself, in 2 weeks' time, I've got Claire Gardner joining me, and she's a professional photographer. She's a brand photographer, and she's the genius behind my new pictures. So if you want to ask Claire any questions about brand photography, join me in 2 weeks' time at 2:00. So with that, I'm going to ask Ellie to tell us a little bit about her business before we dive into how she set it up.
Yeah. Hello. I run a small website design agency. So it's really around helping women and non-binary entrepreneurs with the techie side of business. And so that's, for me, it kind of boils down usually to websites, but it's also in systems and automation and finding the right tools and setting those up and usually integrating them with your website so that you've got things working for you in the background and you're not having to spend quite as much time navigating those things, and you can do more of what you need to and want to in your life and business.
I mean, that sounds interesting. That sounds like a whole other interview in itself. So I might come back to you at some point to talk about the nuts and bolts of what you do and how we might share that. So you may have noticed Ellie's accent is slightly different. She's from the US, but I'm going to ask her to tell us a little bit about how she set up her business and where she lives today.
Sure. Yeah. So, long story short, I was an au pair in Italy. I was backpacking after, for a while, met my now husband when I was backpacking here in Ireland. I live in Northern Ireland now. And yeah, long story short, after we got serious and we decided, okay, well, we need to figure out where to live, it became clear that the choice at the time meant that I would be moving here. And it was a really hard transition in a lot of ways. It's a beautiful country, beautiful people, so much culture, but it rains all the time. And the history here means that the people are very, very friendly, but also sort of guarded. And the job market was completely different. And there was no Mexican food. And so I missed home a lot when I moved here. And so I decided that I needed to build a business that I could work anywhere, that I could go home more often, that I could be with my family in times of celebration and trial fairly easily. And so I started my business originally as a virtual assistant, which quickly evolved into a tech virtual assistant, which eventually I pivoted into website design because I decided I liked project-based work better than long-term ongoing work.
Okay. So, I mean, that in itself, setting up a business is a challenge in itself. Just even put aside the marketing element. So what sort of challenges did you come across setting up your business, and how did you overcome them?
Yeah. Really, at first it was a matter of like time versus money. Like it's, so I started on the side of my full-time job. So I was working as a legal secretary here in Belfast, and it was a really cool little company, and I got to wear a lot of hats. I was helping them with their social media marketing, and I was running their events and things like that. So it was a really fun company to work for. And so they were really supportive in me running a part-time business as well. So I started out just by actually the first iteration of my business completely failed. Like not a single customer, no work at all. And that was me attempting to help startups with their systems and automation and the same types of things I do now, but for a market that doesn't really value that, especially at that stage of their business. They value messy, they value chaos. And I worked in the startup when I first moved to Belfast, a different one than the law firm, and found that like you couldn't find a document. There were like 6 versions of everything.
Yeah.
There was no script of what you were supposed to say if you were working customer support. And so anyway, thought that would be a really cool place to use my skills. It didn't turn out as super wanted. So I pivoted, and I always thought that being a virtual assistant would be sort of blah, till I realized you can specialize, and you can do the things you want to do and help people in the way you want to do. Even if you're a generalist, most generalist VAs still don't do everything, right? They still specialize a little bit. So yeah, I really struggled for a while. But I think the biggest challenge over here was that at first I knew nobody, right?
Mm-hmm.
I didn't know anybody. I had my husband's family, and they are quite entrepreneurial, but at the same time, like, they're very different than they would need very different people than what I do.
Mm-hmm.
So I had to really struggle to build my own networking community and the types of my own, I don't really like the word audience, but my own following in a way.
Yeah. And so we didn't discuss this, but like, how did you go about finding a network of your own?
I threw myself into a lot of groups. So I started in the Lean and Entrepreneurs Committee or community here. Now I'm on the committee for Belfast and Northern Ireland. I joined Women in Business here in Northern Ireland. I joined a coaching community that was a small monthly membership called Assembly, which is pivoted into a full mastermind now. I started, through relationships I'd built, then I'd started speaking in people's group coaching programs about websites or automation. I started speaking at events and things like that, writing for these various groups. And then that just kind of kept getting, and then the other thing is, my biggest thing, I like hammer on about this a lot with my clients, but there's a huge thing for social proof. So once you've got a couple clients in and you can share a testimonial or a case study or the proof of your work, so like I can show the websites I built, that also makes a really big difference.
Yeah. And so how did you sort of cope with the cultural element? You mentioned it earlier, because I in my previous life, the last company I worked for was based in the US, and working with people from the US is really different. Like, British people are really different, and then you can't put us all in a lump as British people, because Northern Irish people are really different. So like, how did you cope culturally?
Well, it helps that I think honestly my Americanism has sort of helped me. I'm louder, I'm more brazen, I'm a little more, and then I'm also just like an extrovert as a human. So I think it's really benefited me. I went to a networking event, I remember years ago, I think it was a Lean In event, and I said, this is what I do and I'm really good at it. And somebody said, nobody says that. I was like, well, like, so there's sort of a culture here in Northern Ireland, especially, of like not getting above your station or not being, or you have to be sort of humble about what you are. And that's not me. That's not how I was raised. And I think there's a certain thing that Americans are sort of taught, that we're all special, right? We're all unique and special, and we're all individuals, and that's not as common in this culture. You're expected to be more part of the community. And so anyway, I think being American, especially in this community, has really helped. I think the other thing that really set me apart is there was nobody really doing what I was doing in this community. Now, my clients aren't just in Northern Ireland, but obviously a good chunk of them are. And there was nobody that was doing tech virtual assistants. So there's other virtual assistants. Actually, when I first moved here, people didn't really know what a virtual assistant was. You had to do a lot of education, which is really weird, because I felt like in England and in like in America, people knew what a virtual assistant was. So there's a lot of education around what a virtual assistant is, what they do. But in addition to that, and it's funny because I don't even do virtual assistants anymore, but I think the other thing was that set me apart, other than the techie stuff, is my aesthetic. God love Northern Ireland, but people here have the ugliest websites and logos. Like,
Okay.
and so like not everybody obviously, but a lot of people do. And I think my aesthetic and my ability to help people with theirs was a big thing.
Yeah. Oh, amazing. So, I mean, you touched a little bit on not knowing anybody, but what was your biggest marketing challenge in terms of, promoting your business?
Yeah, it was just meeting people. I think at first it was
Mm-hmm.
also, I think, getting that like this is what I do thing down. It can be so easy to it can be harder to nail down that, like, because even now, like, I support people in a myriad of ways, but the main thing I do is websites, right?
Yeah.
So I think it can be really challenging to find like that your thing and then communicate your thing. But yeah, I think it was just my biggest challenge at first was knowing nobody.
So, I mean, a lot of people do struggle to boil down what they do, and you've sort of come from, I'm a VA doing this. I'm a VA, but I'm a technical VA, and then I'm not on websites, but I'm actually not the making the websites pretty, but I can do it. But I'm the thing at the back of the website that helps your website be better. Or so, like, how what was the process of you getting to that where you are now?
Yeah, well, I think I tell people a lot, but like my two skills in life, like pretty much it, are to create order and to make things pretty. And I think one of the biggest challenge things that people don't really realize about websites is there's a lot of content that you have to get organized in a way that is going to be useful for people. So it can be you see a lot of websites that are like almost overwhelming because they have too much stuff on them, and it's not well laid out.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but I feel like in other lives, I could have been an interior decorator or personal organizer. Like these things that I have to create systems and make things pretty could have been a lot of different careers. But I found that I have a real passion. So I started as VA because I was like, okay, this is where I get my foot in the door. Like this is where I start an online business. I don't know what it's going to end up as, but I knew I could start there. I had the skills. I'd worked in admin and all this stuff for ages. I found very quickly that a lot of people were not great time management type people. And then because they didn't know the tools and it can feel really overwhelming to Google, okay, like, what do I need to book appointments? And then like 17 million results come up, right? So having somebody like me that could say, okay, these, like, literally just hear about their day and say these 3 tools, like these specific ones, not just because I haven't picked them off of Google, I know that they're going to help your business, was something that I felt really passionate about. I also, and I still do, I think that tools and systems help us create boundaries. I think they help us create time and space in our business. They help us do business better. They help us create consistency in various places in our business. And so that's where I kind of pivoted to tech virtual assistants. And then when I left my job and went full time with it, I had very, very, like, almost instantly, like, it was so lucky. I'm really grateful for it, but I had like an instantly like filled my free time, right? So I left my job and suddenly had a full time client roster. And I have anxiety. So having that many, and I love to help small businesses. So I had a lot of solo entrepreneurs on small retainer packages, and I would get like essentially loads and loads of like tiny jobs. And that really fuels my anxiety. Like, it was like, I didn't know what was going to hit my desk for the day. I didn't know how many emails were going to be in my inbox. I found it was really overwhelming for me. So making the decision to pivot to website design, where I could decide how many clients I wanted to take on, when I was taking them on. And I knew sort of then, based on that, what was hitting my inbox and what I needed to accomplish for the day. It made, and it also meant, like, and that, yeah, essentially it made things more manageable for me, right? There's tons of people that don't mind all these little bitty things, that their brains thrive on that, but mine did not.
So it's interesting, and I think people do need to really work out. I think it's working out, A, what you're good at, but B, what you love. and I think the more people can hone in on that, the easier it becomes to articulate what your business is and what you stand for.
Mm-hmm.
So just moving on, so I know Ireland is a very north and south, because I've done a bit of business in south, but it's quite a well-connected region. But in terms of marketing, what have you done outside of networking to promote your business?
Yeah, so I've done like quite a lot over time. I mean, don't get overwhelmed with this list because I started with nothing, right? I started like step at a time. But I have a blog and a YouTube channel, so I've recently pivoted from written posts to video posts. So I create tutorials around Squarespace. I've created loads of blog posts around Squarespace and time management and those kinds of things, and those have been repurposed into social media posts and Pinterest posts and things like that. I have an Instagram account that I've been like pretty religious about for a few years, but I'm actually, while I'll still be using it, really going to be honing in on the search engine content going forward because Instagram is getting exhausting. Um, and I'm probably just old right at this stage, but I also never signed up for TikTok, right? I don't have a TikTok and Instagram's trying to be TikTok and I'm not here for it. Yeah, I focused on my SEO. I have done a lot of like pre-pandemic and even early pandemic. I found that doing free workshops really well worked for growing my email list. So I've done a little bit of a lot of things, and I think it's okay to do and to pivot. Like there's some of these things I don't do anymore because they're just either draining me or they're not performing in the way they did in a pre-pandemic world.
And you've hit the nail on the head there, really, because people like you and I, where it is just us in our businesses and even smaller teams, there's not all the time in the world to try out everything. Before we went live, you were talking about how your first business, or was it when we went live, how it failed really fast. But it is about failing fast and learning and moving on. So pre-pandemic, I spent 2019 or 2020 really being so consistent on Instagram. I was posting every day, stories, all of that. And I looked at the end of 2020 and I'm just like, no, nothing. So I'm on Instagram and I'll post something every now and again. So if I'm doing an event, I'll maybe post a story or do some pictures or something. But it's not returning enough for me to spend all my time on there. And the thing that does work for me, and you've mentioned it, is the email list. So I spend time growing and nurturing my email list because I have had business from there. So it is really understanding what works for you and what doesn't. And you've tried a lot of different things, which is good to do because you never know until you try.
Yeah.
But just coming back to the SEO, can you just explain a little bit about how you focus? Because I think you've said you referred to Pinterest and YouTube as search engines, and I'm guessing that SEO is tied into that. So can you just explain what you're doing there?
So, I have outsourced a lot of it because I'm not an SEO expert, but if you can do the research and find your right keywords, putting in the right keywords in various places in your website, using the right features of your website to make sure that your website is SEO like search engine optimized, essentially making Google happy, right? Doing the things that make Google happy, like indexing their site, using images in the right places, using alt text in the right places. Essentially, Google wants your site to be as accessible as possible. So this has a really good knock-on effect of being really good for your users and for maybe your users that might be visually impaired. So it means you're putting alt text in, you're using headings, bullet points in the right place, you're making your content skimmable, you're using various things that make your website easier to use. So it's a really good knock-on effect. So that's website SEO, and there's a lot to that. It's kind of an ongoing, that's the thing about SEO, is it is an ongoing beast. It's not a one and done. You're constantly, like every time you add a blog post, you have to make sure it's optimized. But the other thing is that you've got, so then also the reason I'm switching more to Pinterest and YouTube is they are search engines. So I can create, like, have you ever been on YouTube and your like recommended feed you see something that's a year old, 2 years old, 6 months old. Content just hangs around longer. And it's also searchable. So if somebody, especially for somebody like me, I can create website tutorials. So how to do this thing in Squarespace. And somebody Googles how to do this thing in Squarespace, and my video pops up, and they find me, they find my work. They can go to my blog post. Maybe they buy a website power hour with me, or a template or something like that. So it's just, I think it's going to be more sustainable for me long term with the current, my current business model and the current social media landscape.
And with Pinterest, I don't want this to turn into a Pinterest tutorial, but with Pinterest, are you linking back to those YouTube videos, or is that going to some other content?
With Pinterest, they're linking back to my blog, which has the YouTube video embedded.
Neat. I'm learning something here. I've had a YouTube channel for a while, and I have like these videos go on my YouTube channel, but I haven't really worked out what to do with it beyond that. But I'm really liking your approach, so I may steal it or borrow it.
Go for it. I think the thing is in my world, obviously websites, your website is your only part of the internet that you have control over. You cannot change what YouTube does with its algorithm, what Instagram or TikTok do with their algorithms. So you should always be pointing your content back to your site. So I wouldn't want to point that content to YouTube, because I want them to come to my website.
Yeah.
Where I'm in control.
And that's something that I say. So for me, it's two things. It's your website and your email list. Those are the two things that you own outright. And but even with your email list, you don't have complete control, because somebody can unsubscribe. But if they do, I'm just like, that's it. You have to kind of just let them go.
Yeah,
I'm not taking it personally, but it's what you own, isn't it? It's the space that you own. So cool. So in terms of marketing, you've covered a plethora of things there, but roughly how much time a week do you spend on your marketing?
Probably like 2 hours a week. I am a solo entrepreneur, but I also have 2 virtual assistants.
Okay.
One helps me with kind of basic web design and admin, and the other is like almost exclusively content repurposing. So I create my newsletter, which I won't lie, it takes me I do it once a month. It's over 1,000 words. It really is a very vulnerable piece of work that I create, where I talk a lot about like what's going on in my life, business, how they interact, things I've got coming up. So I do plug, my last blog post and those kinds of things as well. And I always end up with a testimonial. So there's a formula to it. So it does help. But at the same time, I create a lot of content around that. So that probably takes me 2-3 hours once a month. Then my assistant will go through, turn that into social media posts.
Mm-hmm.
I create a blogger. I also create, those YouTube tutorials, and then she'll take those. I put them in the blog, and she'll take those and put them into social media posts. She also will go through some of my old content and, bring those back into social media posts and things like that. So I have help with my marketing, but me personally, I would say, 2 hours a week for the various things I need to do.
And it's interesting, because I have help. I have someone who takes care of my entire Facebook presence, because I was just posting stuff and creating all those images, and it all takes time. And on top of that, the client work takes time. So I have to obviously make the space for people who are paying me to do stuff for them. But actually having someone who can do those social media posts is very useful. All the interaction is always me, so it's all I'm the one who replies and does all of that. But having someone who will go think about it and go back and go, I did see a blog post about this a while ago, and pulling that forward and bringing that back up again is very useful, because sometimes I forget that I've written stuff. So it's a really good tip to get help. So it's in terms of sort of running your business and marketing, what's the biggest lesson you've learned around marketing your business?
The biggest lesson around marketing my business, I guess it's just that there's no one way to do it. There's no perfect way to do it. You just have to show up There's a woman that I really like who has built her entire business model based on Myers-Briggs, the personality test, which is honestly, like, if you look into it, it's not a real thing, but I love personality tests because it makes you feel seen, and then it also is good for introspection. But the point of what I'm saying is she has done a thing where she has created a marketing guide for every personality type. And and what I mean by that is that there's something for everybody, right? So I had a client who just could not fathom getting loud and out there about her business. But when she started marketing that every sale, 10% goes to her favorite charity, she had an easier time of that because she felt like she was doing good in the world. So you just got to find your thing that makes marketing feel less weird for you.
And it's difficult when you're doing it for yourself, because when I was working for other companies and marketing was my only job, it was the thing that I did for those companies. It was easy for me to say, well, these are the reasons why you should buy this. This is the benefit that you would. When it comes to you, it's really difficult because, especially as a service provider, you are your business. You're the product.
Yeah, it can feel very vulnerable.
Yeah. But it's almost, and coming back to what you were saying about how in Northern Ireland people are a bit more, they don't like to brag. Then you're not supposed to say you're good at something. I think that's the whole British culture thing, because we're all very we don't like to say we're good at things.
Well, and honestly, if you do, you could be socially penalized. Like, people are like, oh, who is she to say or do that? Like, so there's a good reason why people don't, which is a shame.
But you're right. You need to find your way to do it, and it's a way that you feel comfortable with, and not everyone's comfortable. When not everyone's an extrovert, or not everyone is. What's the other one? The colors. I did some sales training where everyone's a color, and it's kind of the same. It's similar to Myers-Briggs, but everyone's got a personality.
Yeah.
I know that I'm I think it was Myers-Briggs. I'm a starter finisher. So I like to start something and I like to finish it. I don't give up in the part way through. So you always want me on a project because I'll help you start it, but I'll also get you over the line to finish it.
Same. Yep, same.
So it's interesting, but you're right. There is something for everybody in terms of marketing, and you just really need to figure out what works well for you and not get overwhelmed by really focusing in on a few things that work for you that you've got time for.
Exactly. So, I have another contact who just she gave up on all social media. She just has her email list, and she focuses on connecting with people and going on their podcasts. That is her entire marketing strategy, is just going on podcasts.
And that's perfectly fine if it works for you. That's and obviously it saves you a lot of time for being on social media. So I'll just finish up asking you, what are your sort of top 3 marketing tips that you would share with other small business owners?
My first one is practice. Like, you're not going to be like great at everything at first. My first blog posts were horrendous. My first podcast episodes were horrendous. My first, you go back to my early businessy Instagram posts, cringy, especially with how much Instagram's changed now. But I stuck with it. I got more comfortable, and those workshops that I led and those things have made it more comfortable for me to do the YouTube tutorials that I do now, and I've learned from each thing. But yeah, just practice it. And then I guess my other thing is get help. As a past virtual assistant, as someone who has 2 virtual assistants, I wouldn't get nearly anything done. I wouldn't be able to, especially for those things that are going to free you up to do the thing that makes you money. I can make more money now that I'm paying them to do the stuff that takes up so much time.
There we go.
And then I can pay them and myself more. So getting help, usually before you feel ready, I think is really important. And ready, I mean, people think, I still can manage everything myself, but if you can take some of that little bit of spare time you have to set up the processes, learn some stuff, it can make a big difference. And the last thing is, of course, because I'm a web person, have a website, because again, it's the only place that you're in full control. And having a website it not only control of algorithms and stuff, but the way your messaging is perceived, and you can control the order at which people experience your website because statistically people experience websites in a specific order anyway. So you can make sure the right content is in that pattern to help that journey.
And that's, I mean, it's one of the things that is the two, like, as I just said, it's the two things that I say to people that is an absolute must is a website and an email list. But I think if people didn't use social media, I don't think it would harm them as much as they think it would. But I think a website is really important. It just not even the whole sort of having control of that real estate, but it adds credibility to your business. I feel that businesses that only have a Facebook page are just you think of them as maybe lifestyle businesses, or somebody who's doing something in their spare time, and it doesn't feel as if they're a credible real business. And I feel like a website actually gives that portrayal that you are a real business and that you are working full time as a business owner. So definitely a website, which leads me neatly onto Ellie's website address. So if you want to work with Ellie, I've just popped her website details in the comments there, and that goes straight to her resource page. So who doesn't love a free resource? So have a look at that, and look up Ellie's website and see if there's a way that you can work together. So thank you so much for joining me today. That was a really good chat. Really enjoyed finding out more about you, and we kind of veered off in different directions, but it was really interesting. I feel like we need another chat just about exactly like the things that you do, because I feel like that's a whole other topic that we could do that.
The like practical nitty gritty of like how to save time in your business is one of my favorite topics.
Brilliant. We will get
There's loads on my blog, people, if you want to get a head start.
We will get on that, definitely. So I'm definitely going to have Ellie back. Cool. That's all we've got time for this week. Remember, 2 weeks time, I've got Claire Gardner, brand photographer. So if you've got questions about anything to do with brand photography, join us in 2 weeks time. I think it's the 14th of June. Time is running away with me at 2:00. And I will see you then. Take care and bye.